This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I'm your host, Noah Luki, and on today's episode, a big weekend for Calvin Johnson and Alex Karras, two Detroit legends that are now in the Hall of Fame for the Detroit Lions. I'll recap a little bit of that great weekend over there in Canton, and also Jonathan Schoop with a 2-year contract extension with the Detroit Tigers. I will break that down for you and explain what I think is the reason why behind the extension. But hopefully everybody had a great weekend out there. I definitely did, and it's fun. I've been up at my family reunion the last couple days, and really exciting to see a bunch of people I haven't seen in a very long time. We have it at Camp Dearborn, actually up in Milford, if anyone knows where that is. We've been doing it for over 60 years, so it's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy seeing all my relatives from all over the place, not only just Michigan, but all kinds of different states as well. All right, so before I begin, though, I do want to share an encounter that I had a couple days ago, on Tuesday, actually, of this week. So I was at Cedar Point, in Ohio, in Sandusky, with some of my cousins from my family reunion. We decided to go up there for a day, ride the rides, and have a good time, and spend some time with my family that I haven't seen in a very long time. And we're walking by, I believe it was the Dragster, the big ride that they have there, the tallest ride that they have. And I notice a really tall guy, and I kind of did a double take for a second. I was like, he looks really familiar. So, as I looked a little harder, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's Calvin Johnson. And it was kind of crazy, because then I ended up walking up to him, and it was Calvin. So Calvin Johnson was over at Cedar Point. I got to talk to him for probably about 2 minutes, and it was just funny because a couple of days ago he was being enshrined in Canton, and then 2 days later he's at Cedar Point, and at least from when I had seen him, it didn't seem like many people really recognized him. And, I just decided to go up, tell him I was a diehard fan and all that. And, he took the time to talk to me, asked what my name was and everything. And, he was a very genuine guy, and I congratulated him on the Hall of Fame. And, because this is a guy I looked up to as a kid. Playing in the backyard and football and all that, just pretending like, celebrating like he would, just going up and getting that football like he would. I mean, and this is a guy that, is one of my sports heroes, and to be able to meet him, just in the most unlikely place of Cedar Point. I wasn't there expecting to meet anyone, just there to have a good time with my cousins, and all of a sudden I see Calvin. I mean, it was pretty surreal, not gonna lie, just because he was just such an inspiration, and just a really genuine guy, I could tell, and took interest in me. So congratulations to Calvin Johnson, and it was really cool experience to be able to meet him and talk to him for a little bit at Cedar Point. So it was awesome. It was just, I was elated after that. Just my inner fan in me really coming out, and because he was just such an inspiration in my sports life, with my sports fandom, if you will, him and Matthew Stafford and all that, those connections, 9 to 81, so it gave me goosebumps, that's for sure. All right, so I do want to get into more of the Canton celebrations over the weekend at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. By the way, if anyone has never been to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, I definitely think it's worth checking out. There's a great museum in there. There's a lot of pro football memorabilia, obviously. And, if you're someone that's really into football history, or, a lot of the, some of the early stuff and all that, it's definitely really cool to check out. Because, I deep down, I consider myself kind of a little bit of a football historian, because I just really love reading about, NFL history and all that. And, when I was a kid, I remember watching like so many of Football Life's on NFL Network, the NFL Top 10 shows. I started to read a lot more books as I got older, like Michael McCambridge's America's Game. And, so a lot of those authors that were on those NFL Top 10 shows, like those book writers and all that, I was able to read a lot of their books. So, and just over time, over the last decade or so, I've really just had a huge passion for NFL history. And I've always wanted to go to an induction ceremony. It's always been a goal of mine, always a goal to go to the Hall of Fame game. And I really wish the Lions played in that Hall of Fame game. It's been since 1991 when they played the Denver Broncos. That's the last time they played in it. So hopefully one day maybe I'll go to Canton and see the Lions play in the Hall of Fame game, because it's a beautiful stadium as well. 10 years ago, when I first went to the Hall of Fame, it was just being renovated. It was an old stadium. It had not been renovated. Now, this new renovation, the Tom Benson Stadium, the former Saints owner, he gave a lot of money to fund the stadium and all that, the renovations. And the high school state championships, the OHSCA in Ohio, they have their championship game there. So it's a great stadium and a really, really cool complex. And like I said, if you're really into football history, it is the place for you to see. And, it depends. Sometimes, if you're really, really, really into it, it might be worth going back. But even just one time to see it all, it would be, it's really special. It's a really cool place, that's for sure. All right, so Calvin Johnson, of course, getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, on his first try, the first ballot Hall of Famer. And, I've talked about it on previous podcasts before. There is absolutely no doubt about this. I mean, Calvin, he changed the game with those tall receivers, that could just run, a 4.38 speed. I mean, you just don't see guys like that. These guys are like once in a generation players. I mean, you're 6'5", 6'6", 240. I mean, you're basically like a quarterback's weight almost. I mean, even higher. And and on top of that, you have, sub 4.4, 4.3, 4.4 speed. It's incredible. So, in his ability to jump up and get that ball, I mean, no doubt. Would it have helped if you'd have played on some more winning teams? Of course. But, in terms of a, more league-wide status and all that, but, league-wide recognition. But, first ballot Hall of Famer, I mean, that's 100% what Calvin deserves. So I did watch his speech, and I had a couple takeaways from it. I don't want to get into the whole details with Calvin and the money that the Lions owe him and all that. I'm not surprised that he didn't mention, really like the Lions organization in there. That's, it's, the situation has not been really resolved. So I wasn't really surprised. I know in previous podcasts I said, well, maybe, the Hall of Fame, maybe this will be the turning point. Not really. They still have a lot of work to do. But, nevertheless, that's not the point of this. The point of this is, to celebrate Calvin's Hall of Fame legacy. And the guy who presented him was Derek Moore. He actually played for the Lions for 2 seasons in 1993 to 1994. But really his major work was after, where he was the team chaplain and character development guy, a real spiritual mentor for Calvin at Georgia Tech. He was there from 2001 to just 2020, so just last year. He was the longtime team chaplain and character development guy for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. So a guy that was very inspirational for Calvin, was the guy who was the man who helped him, whatever you call it in the induction ceremony, where you have the Hall of Fame the bronze, and they help take the towel off of the cloth off of the bronze, so that now the bronze is revealed to you. So it definitely special in that aspect as well. But he did mention a couple themes that Calvin mentioned. He talked a lot about the physical pain, that he went through, and I don't think that's any surprise. That's no secret. I mean, he was very public about the physical pain that he went through. And I mean, you play 9 seasons in the NFL, you're that big of a guy, and you're getting hit left and right all the time. I mean, your body, takes a toll. Some guys, it depends on the position. Some guys, are very, very fortunate enough to not really get hurt. Other guys, they get banged up and all that. So, Calvin, definitely one of those guys. But, he kind of, his speech was a little bit of a message to, never give up, even if you're facing a lot of pain and adversity and all that. And I thought that was nice. And he talked about leaving your own legacy, and so he kind of reached out to the fans listening as well, which I thought was pretty cool as well. So he thanked the Lions fans. He thanked all his teammates that were there. It was cool to see Matthew Stafford, Dominic Raiola, a couple other former teammates that were there as well. And, thanking Lions fans in the city of Detroit. Every week, he tried to show up for them. And I could tell he really enjoyed, the fans here. And especially from my conversation with him when I told him, I'm a diehard Lions fan. I really looked up to you as a kid and all that. I could tell he really took a genuine interest when I met him over at Cedar Point, just from my experience. And then it kind of got interesting at the end of the speech, talking about the elevating others' wellness. He was really promoting self-wellness and all that. And then, he got into the whole plant medicines thing with his, not promoting his business necessarily, his business ventures that he's doing with Rob Sims, former Lions teammate, who I believe was also there. But talking about plant medicines and a big alternative to opioids and all that. I mean, in my opinion, did that part really need to be in there? Probably not. But I mean, this is a guy that played with a lot of pain. And, the NFL is becoming a little bit more tolerable with those kind of medicines, the marijuana and all that for healing. So, if he felt it was appropriate to mention, that's all him. Personally, I just wasn't a big fan of that, but, other people have their other opinions. But, it's a big weekend. And this is, the pinnacle of your professional career is getting inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And he will forever be enshrined in it, and I'm very, very happy that he was able to get in on first ballot. I knew he was definitely going to get in for sure. Just some people maybe have questioned if he was going to get in on, the first ballot or not, just because he played 9 years in the NFL, which is a relatively short career for a Hall of Famer, and then also playing for the Lions, who only made the playoffs 2 times in his entire tenure there and didn't win a single playoff game, and all the losing seasons. We don't need to get into that. But definitely a great weekend for Calvin Johnson, that's for sure. But a guy that I don't want people to forget about, Alex Karras. Now, Alex Karras, of course, and this is my football historian coming out of me. Alex Karras, the class of 2020, but their class was getting inducted this year because there was no official ceremony last year. So they kind of did it with the 2 days. I had a friend that went to both days, actually. So they did the class of 2020 on Saturday, and then Sunday was the class of 2021. So Calvin and Charles Woodson and Peyton Manning and all those guys. So it's an interesting story for Alex Karras. Alex Karras, he was one of the best defensive tackles of his day. He played in the late 50s, early 60s for the Lions. And, they had some ferocious defenses, especially in the early 60s, where Don Shula was their defensive coordinator. And if you ask anyone from his era, they would say he was one of the best defensive tackles in the entire league. You ask Jerry Kramer, who just got into the Hall of Fame a couple years ago, who was on that vaunted Green Bay offensive line on the Packers sweep in the 1960s with Vince Lombardi. These guys had a real respect for Alex Karras as a football player, But I think what happened was, and why it took so long for him to get into the Hall of Fame, was because, in 1963, he was suspended for an entire season for gambling. And it was the same with Paul Hornung from the Packers. Now, Paul Hornung got in 1986, I believe, but Alex Karras, it took till 2020. But it didn't really seem like he was remorseful for gambling, which I didn't think, helped his situation. Also, on top of that, the Lions didn't really win a whole lot when he was there as well. Obviously no championships or anything, but they and another thing too is that it seems like he was very he just was a kind of a dirty player a little bit, and I don't think some people like that about him, and at least he came off as dirty to a lot of people. So a lot of those factors, I think, combined. But I mean, just as a football player itself, he was a Hall of Fame player, and so it's really, really good to see Alex Karras getting in. And he always was on those top 10 lists of players not in the Hall of Fame, the top 10 players not in the Hall of Fame. So really good that former Lion Alex Karras is in, and he had a long movie career after he retired, and then he actually passed away in 2012. So a lot of his family members were there at the ceremony as well. So a great weekend for pro football. It was great to see the Hall of Fame game, Steelers and Cowboys. Football is finally back, and the Lions, of course, with their first preseason game on Friday against the Bills. We'll break down more of training camp and all that next week with the Lions, but I did want to focus this podcast more on the Hall of Fame just because of the football history and everything that is so great about the Hall of Fame and all that. So, there's a lot of storylines with the Lions. We've done it the last couple weeks. Go back and listen to some of the episodes from training camp as well. But definitely a great weekend for the Hall of Fame. And for a couple Lions players as well, one from each class, that's for sure. All right, so to end the podcast, I did want to talk a little bit about Jonathan Schoop. And Jonathan Schoop, a big-time part of this Tigers offense this season. They don't really have a star necessarily, but this is a guy that has really shined and has been a bright spot in the Tigers offense, and a real guy that has really helped with expediting the rebuild process, if you will. So the Tigers decided last week to sign Jonathan Schoop to a 2-year, $15 million extension. And he does have an opt-out after 2022. So basically, if he plays next year and says, I don't want to play anymore for the Tigers, he can move on. But if he wants to, he can sign on for 2023. So they could have him for two years. And I think this is really key and very interesting as well, because originally I had thought that Jonathan Schoop was going to be a guy who just, he was going to get traded, or, because a guy like him is, especially with a hot bat, been playing really well, 29 years old, a leader in the clubhouse kind of thing. A contending team could have really used him, especially with his hot bat. And that's why I thought maybe the Tigers would trade him at the deadline. Not a whole lot of action. Really, the only thing that really happened was the Tigers traded Daniel Norris for this minor league prospect. I didn't really get much into that because it wasn't a whole lot of sizzle. It's Daniel Norris had struggled with a lot of injuries, and then all of a sudden, this unproven minor league prospect comes in. So not a big deal. Daniel Norris's career never really took off. But as a Tiger, but Jonathan Schoop, I think this is an important signing because it proves that the Tigers are not in rebuild mode as much as some people may think. Because if they were in rebuild mode, they would try to ship Schoop away. And I know AJ Hinch and Al Avila were very public over the past couple weeks before the trade deadline, saying if you want any of our players, you're going to have to ask for a lot. It's going to come at a steep price. And I don't know if they were interested in trading Schoop at all, but they just didn't get the right price, or I'm not sure. But at least extending him is great for the Tigers as a team. Now, is he like a superstar of a player like Miguel Cabrera was in his prime? No. But this is a guy, and you're not really signing him for much. I mean, 2 years, $15 million. This isn't like the big contracts, the big hefty contracts that Mike Ilitch was signing, 10 years ago with Prince Fielder and Miguel Cabrera. Or Justin Verlander even too. I mean, it's not like that at all now. This is very small, and like I said, he has an opt-out after 2022 if things don't go right or whatever. But this is a guy that is a real leader in the clubhouse, a guy that, a veteran that the young guys can look up to, because this is a team that is very young player laden, if you will. And then obviously with the prospects that'll be coming up with Spencer Torkelson and Riley Green, all those players, they need a guy to look up to. Also, the other thing too is the Tigers don't really have a lot of great middle infield prospects. You could play second, shortstop. So I think signing Schoop at least gives them a veteran presence, a guy that can really lock down the middle of the diamond there at second base or shortstop. So I think, it proves that the Tigers don't really have a whole lot of guys, because Riley Green is probably going to end up playing center field, and Torkelson, they want him to play third, but I wouldn't be surprised if I see him at first, if we see him at first base at all. So, the corner infields seem to be set, especially with Guys like Isaac Paredes, if he will even pan out, and then obviously Torkelson, and then Riley Green, of course, out in the outfield. So, but Schoop, like I said, I think it's a great signing, and I think it's a great idea from the Tigers. And, really, the Tigers have been playing well, despite, they're below 500, obviously. But this is a team that has definitely showed promise, and definitely has. It seems like a spark has been lit. Now, I'm not saying that when Ron Gardenhire was here, he was a bad manager or anything. I think Ron Gardenhire is a good manager, but the rosters that he was dealt with, and plus, I think really he was just there to guide the ship. I think him and everyone knew that he was not really going to be a manager long term, and a guy that so he guided the Tigers through some of their dark days, between when the rebuild first began, in my estimation, 2017 to now, where hopefully the rebuild is just ending. So do I expect the Tigers to compete for a playoff spot next season? I mean, I don't, I mean, I wouldn't. Look, I'm not saying that they will make it. They will win the division. They will make a wild card. But I definitely think next season the Tigers should push for a playoff spot. They should at least try to be in contention, at least in the last month or two of the season. Are they in contention now? No. I'm not expecting them to compete for any wild card or anything. The White Sox look like they have the division all locked up. The Indians pretty much ended their season a couple weeks ago, basically. So it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out. But I really do think the Tigers could start competing for a playoff spot in the next year or two. And Jonathan Schoop is a guy that really can, help steer the ship and really be a leader for those young guys and really lock down, second base or shortstop, for a team that has really struggled in that, especially with prospects. And now a lot of these younger guys that they have now, like Zach Short at shortstop, he's kind of bounced around between Toledo and the big league club. Eric Haas, a catcher, rookie catcher from Divine Child High School in Dearborn, who's been playing really well as well. I just don't know how much these guys can be sustained, though. I don't know how much their success can really be sustained. I mean, Akil Baddoo is another guy. Let's hope his success, but he seems to be a guy that can really, have a greater success long term than some of these other guys. So, and the Tigers, they lucked out with getting him in the Rule 5 draft. I mean, last season it was no minor league season, obviously, and a guy that kind of slipped through the cracks, and the Tigers finally found, and he could prove to be a guy that really could be a foundational piece for the future. That's for sure. And it was just defined in the Rule 5 draft. And Jonathan Schoop, I think, like I said, I think it's time that I think the Tigers are acknowledging that this rebuild is closing, and we're more in contention mode, and a guy that could really, really help, and a guy that really can show the young guys around, and hopefully hit for the same as he did this past year or this year. So hopefully they can put him in the lineup and get him going with the bats. Hopefully Miguel Cabrera heats up as well. I know that milestone marker is he's got 498 as of now, home runs. Hopefully this weekend he'll break that, because I'll be going to the game on a Sunday when they play the Indians. So hey, if it happens, if 500 happens when I'm there, that'd be tremendous. That's for sure. All right, so make sure to check out all the other content on the podcast network. I know John Macaroon does a great job with Sports Illustrated and all that as well, and his Doc and Jock podcast with his cousin Adam Strozinski. They do a great job. The Fan Report, there's a lot of Pistons, they're big Pistons people. I know Pistons Summer League is starting up with Cade Cunningham and all that. They do a great job of really diving deep with the Pistons. Michigan football, starting back up the Michigan podcast. And Steve Dace does a great job with his friend Mark Rogers, and it's a great podcast to listen to. Hopefully, in the next couple weeks, we'll get more in depth with college football, but definitely a little more Lions focused, I would say, this this podcast is. But thanks again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to join us next week only on Open Mic Night.